If you're anything like me, you've watched Disney churn out disaster after disaster and wondered why they keep doing it. I think I've figured it out. Disney has a playbook with one page, and all it reads is how to ruin a movie in 5 steps. See you on the other side. It's usually attributed to Albert Einstein, but the exact person who coined it doesn't really matter. The saying goes, insanity is doing the same things over and over and expecting a different result. Does this not perfectly describe modern filmmaking and Disney in particular? With recent interviews resurfacing of their lead actress of the new Snow White movie, Rachel Zegler, running her mouth hole about her movie, we've got the best example yet of a studio seeming to do everything possible to kill their own movie in the crib. They all seem to follow the same pattern. Step 1. Blatantly disregard the source materials. This should seem obvious, but if you're going to say there's going to be an adaptation of a classic story, it stands to reason that the people that made it a classic, fans, will have expectations of seeing that story on screen. It's crazy, I know. Instead, what studios have begun doing is simply using these old IPs as a bait and switch in order to lure moviegoers in and then give them something entirely different, something they want to push. Now, this can take the form of many things, from blatant race and sex swaps, sexuality swaps, to completely altering the story to appeal to their hoped-for modern audience. Like we've seen so many times over the past few years, Snow White is seemingly doing all of these. They've hired a Latina to play a young German princess who's described by the Brothers Grimm in the original fairy tale as skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony. So, yeah. They've gotten rid of the whole concept of dwarves in this adaptation in favor of... who the fuck knows what this is? Renaissance Fair extras? This was partly the fault of Peter Dinklage, who decided to pull up the step stool behind himself and suggest that casting dwarf actors in these roles would be insulting. The problem is that the dwarves in Snow White were no more humans with dwarfism than they were in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. They're magical, mining dwarves, and if Disney was going to do a live-action version, they should have simply done what Peter Jackson did with the forced perspective and called it a day. Disney has also scrapped the whole idea of the prince saving Snow White with true love's kiss, and the idea of romance in general, because that's too old-fashioned. Which brings up Step 2. Talk shit about the original and by extension, anyone who likes it. This usually happens once fans inevitably have seen the original source materials are being ignored. You then start getting comments like these gems.
You said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is...
She's not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be. You know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story. With a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that this time.
Now, aside from the arrogance dripping off of them, it's as if they've never seen the movie they're shitting on. If they had, they'd understand that Snow White really is the heroine these pretend feminists are trying in vain to make. She overcomes the horrific treatment by her stepmother. She nearly gets her damn heart cut out from her chest, left for dead in the forest, becomes friends with a group of men who are entirely different from herself, and proceeds to make their lives better through her personality and inner strength. When her trusting nature gets the better of her and the evil queen tricks her, her loving and trusting nature is why the dwarves refuse to abandon her. Had she belittled them or girl-bossed them around to show what a strong leader she was, they likely would have said, fuck it, and tossed her in a grave rather than building the glass coffin which enabled her to be saved by true love's kiss. And as far as being saved, she had already saved the dwarves by her presence, and it made them better men, not unlike Wendy from the original Peter Pan, a story Disney has also bastardized in the exact same way. She had so touched the lives of the dwarves that they were the ones that chased down the queen and forced her off the ledge to her death. But they're unable to see any of this, because anything not made yesterday is seen as bad.
The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so.
There's a desire to actively find something to hate in these things that came before themselves. It's crazy. And this causes the next obvious move by fans as they understandably lash out at the creators that clearly have no respect for the things they loved. In turn, this enrages creators who are appalled that fans would dare push back at their reimagining these classics, and you begin to get all these access media types circling the wagons and writing cope articles trying to persuade outraged fans that they're wrong. All of this is then exacerbated by Step 3. Hiring a wildly unlikable lead that never shuts the fuck up. There aren't many things people hate more than having a privileged narcissist rolling their eyes at them as they actor-splain why what the fans loved about the original was outdated and problematic, and why only they understand what's correct. We've seen this many times recently from Disney, and each time I shake my head at the tone deafness of both the actor and the studio for allowing it to happen. With Rachel Zegler, it's reached its zenith, and she somehow made Brie Larson seem humble and grounded in this comparison.
Is that like a personal attack or something? Or...
I realize that most of these comments were made months ago and are only being dredged up now because the actors' strike and the lack of news coming out of Hollywood, but she did say them, and the responses from the studio and from her since they've resurfaced haven't remotely approached apologies. And they never will, because the longer this drags on and the angrier fans get, the more we'll see Step 4. Pre-blame fans for various thought crimes in advance of the movie's inevitable failure. It's 2023, so pointing out that The Little Mermaid was a fairy tale set in the mid-1800s in Denmark, and that Ariel clearly would have reflected that the way the Disney original did, is racist. It apparently was also racist to point out that Peter Pan was originally written by a Scottish author in the early 1900s, so having Peter, Tinkerbell, and the Lost Boys be changed to be more diverse was idiotic. So when studios get the completely inevitable pushback, they lean into the racist trolls on YouTube and online routine. Sorry, but no. Almost no one has any issue with studios making stories with more diverse casts when the stories are either original works or fables which are from less represented groups. The issue is when studios obnoxiously take well-loved and classic stories and alter them to try and force diversity where there wasn't any. This is both insulting to longtime fans of all races, and it ought to be insulting to whichever race or sex the studios are trying to pander to like this, because it is quite literally sloppy seconds rather than the elevation of new and exciting material featuring those groups. The problem is that this is inevitable so long as Step 5. Everything gets filtered through the 2023 DEI filter. I have said it before and I will say it again. If Disney or any studio for that matter makes an entertaining film at this point, it is a complete fucking accident. Being entertaining is secondary at best. The actual goal, and they are happy to tell you so, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Every decision Disney makes first gets forced through this filter. It's why the first 4 steps keep happening, even though the rest of us all watch Disney setting itself on fire and wondering why. How can you fuck up remaking classic stories? Well, because the goal isn't making good movies that honor the classics. It's about pushing whatever modern message is the new current thing and finding just the right skin suit to stick it into to get it to pass as the old thing. The new Snow White looks to be the Mount Everest of this plan. I'm hesitant to say Disney could go even further than this, but I'd be hard-pressed to figure out how. This is the only play they have, and the crazy thing, it's the only one they want. So they'll keep doing this to every last classic story they own, and to the classic stories they've bought from others, and to any future classics they somehow don't yet own. There are no adults left in the building. For years, these studios have hired activists, and activists don't care about the health of the company. They only care about their activism. I am sorry to say, I don't think there's going to be anybody that steps in and saves Disney at this point. Snow White is going to be an absolute disaster, and everyone can see it coming. Until next time, thanks for watching.